Welcome to Writing Habit. I want to just take you through all the features that we have available for authors. You can jump to different sections using the timeline controls in the description of this video. When you're creating a project, if you already have an existing manuscript and you can get that manuscript into an HTML or a docx format, you can very quickly import it into Writing Habit. Let me show you what this looks like inside of a Google Doc. So first off, I go to File, I go to Download. There will be a Microsoft Word option. So I'm going to go ahead and download that. I'm only after the current tab, that's fine, and I'm going to hit export. It's going to process, download, and now I can see that I have this file. I'm going to go back to Writing Habit now. I'm going to upload the manuscript, select the document so that you know which one you want, and you can see that it's now processed that document. It says it's detected 40 chapters. I know that's wrong. This section right here is how it's determining those chapters. It's found heading 2 and heading 3 styles that were used inside of the Google Doc. So if you go back to the Google Doc real quick, this heading, if I click on it, you can see it says heading 2. This one says heading 3. This is a POV tag. It's not a new chapter. So I'm going to jump back over here and say, I don't want the H3 tags to be chapters. That will collapse that content into the chapter above. So now if I look at them, prologue, diagnosis, stranger, etc., they're all here. If you wanted, you could merge two things together. That's not usually going to be useful if you've correctly styled your chapters and we've been able to parse them well, but you can do it if you wanted to. You can also show more just to double check and see if there's content in there that shouldn't be before you create your chapter. In my case, I'm relatively confident that this is right because if I go over to Google Doc, you can see over here that I have the outline. And how it's slightly indents means that I've used headings the right way, different sizes for things that have different purposes. So H2, which probably should be an H1 if I was doing it right for chapters, but I was consistent, so Writing Habit will then know how to process that document effectively. Now that I've made my selections, I could come into the project, name it, go to the bottom, and create the project and those 28 documents. It will ask if you want to apply some standardized formatting just to make it look nice. I like the drop cap. I also want to indent every first line so that it looks correct and remove empty paragraphs. Now my project is inside of Writing Habit and ready to go. And that's importing your project. But I'm going to walk you through what the dashboard has to offer. Every project that you create is listed with some information about how many chapters it has, if it has a deadline, and if you do have a deadline, how many words per day it's going to require to meet that deadline, what your daily goal is, your progress against that daily goal, and then your word count compared to your overall total goal that you've specified in your project settings. You can also indicate a status if a project is complete. For example, you can come in here and change its status. You can quickly jump to project settings or click into the title itself to go to the project editor and planning experience. Below the project settings, we have some of the stats and analytics that are available to you. We have words per day, how many minutes you spent, your writing streak, then current and previous is actually showing you how many words you wrote last week compared to this week, or last month compared to this month. And then the blue and gray bars are doing the same thing. This is this week's Wednesday versus last week's Wednesday. And then you have your achievements below the page. And at the end of the year, we have our year in review statistical information that shows all that you've accomplished. And that's our dashboard. Next, before we get into projects, I wanted to talk a little bit about the settings and configuration that's available to you. So we're going to go over to our account settings. And inside of the account, you can link your social channels and provide a little bit of information about you. But you also have a lot of control over how Writing Habit is displayed. You can change it from light mode to dark mode. You can pick a custom theme that might fit you personally a little bit better. But I'm going to stick with light mode, but I'm going to keep the forest theme because I like Zelda and it gives me that vibe. You can also come in here and add two-factor authentication, delete your account, add multiple sign-in methods that you can use either one. So this is your internal or account settings page. You can also see your public profile. And your public profile is what other people see if they click on your profile. This page allows you to post articles. Other users are also able to see some of your achievements in terms of the number of words you've been writing. Projects that are public will show up for the public. If they are not public, then projects will only show up for you. Now that the housekeeping is out of the way, I want to talk more about the projects themselves. First, we're going to talk about project settings. Inside of a project, after a project has already been created, you can always change your settings for daily goals, total word count, when you hope to complete by, what days you write on, so that we can calculate the number of words you need to be able to reach that goal. And then also change the color so that in the charts and graphs, this particular project will display differently. Categorization helps other readers find your project if you have made this project public. Beta reading is a way to allow you to request feedback from anyone who you've invited to your project in a very structured way. For example, you can select any of these elements and it will be added to a form that they will see at the end of each chapter. So let's say that I don't want to talk about emotions, point of view, structural, or settings. These are tags that you can add that I'll show you in a minute. Then those things won't show. But if you do use any of those tags, such as characters, if you wanted feedback on your characters, you'd leave this checked, tag the chapter with characters, and then at the end of the chapter, your readers would see that form so they could give it a simple star rating so you know if that character is resonating with them. Additionally, there's a form that's pre-filled with some headings. You can change what those are. Just change the content. You can add more if you want to. What this does is it gives you a very structured way of asking for feedback so that when you have a beta reader, they know exactly what you're looking for and what kinds of questions you want them to respond to. Next, let me talk to you about sharing. You can make it publicly listed, which means anyone will be able to see this project, but that requires that you have a description, an image, and chapters that have been published. In this case, I haven't published any chapters, so while they might be able to visit my project, they won't be able to read any of the content. So there's a difference here between the general access to your project and which of the chapters are actually accessible. Only editors will be able to see unpublished chapters within your project. Lastly, you can configure how your project will be displayed both inside of WritingHabit and your table of contents, or when you export your book as an EPUB file that is ready for publication on KDP or other platforms. You can change the style of the chapter that you are using as well as the font that that chapter would be displayed in. You can also change the style. For example, I'm choosing number and subtitle, but if I just wanted numbers, I could choose that as well. These little tags below are just giving you an indication of which number we're talking about sequentially, where this number with the underline is what the reader would actually see. And if I wanted to change the color of this underline to something else that suited me better, I could adjust that here or get rid of it entirely if I didn't like it. We're going to do number and subtitle, and now you can see what this would look like at the top of a chapter in your project. And we'll go into more detail about exporting an ebook at a later time. Next, though, is numbering. This gives you full control of things like partial chapters. If you parse from the title, that means we're going to look for a number that's there, and we're going to assume that number's right. But automatic means we've sequentially noted that your chapters are in a particular order. Here you can see that order. Because Into the Dark is optional, chapter 3 is actually numbered 3. If this was not optional and it was actually a chapter type, then it would be chapter 3 and this would be chapter 4. So you do have control to indicate which chapters are front matter, back matter, or optional chapters as a way of impacting the automatic ordering of chapters in your project. This is intended to make it very easy to get your chapter numbering right and not have to go back and change it all the time. But you do still have full control over what is displayed in your table of contents and in your final ebook. Finally, you can apply some common styles when you are exporting. For example, if you want to use drop caps, if you want a page break on a scene divider, and what kind of a scene divider you want to use. And finally, you can choose if you want to include particular elements in the ebook itself. For example, if you didn't want the table of contents for some reason, you can leave it out. If you want to support us, you can choose to include the WritingHabit promo mark at the very end of the novel. This is required for accounts that don't have a subscription. Lastly, I want to talk about project actions. This is where you can export, duplicate a project, or remove it entirely. You'll also find the ability to export on top of your project view on every single page. Now back to the project itself. The project detail page gives you a variety of widgets to both plan or directly write. If you're distracted by all the information on the page, you can go into focus mode, which clears everything off, but still gives you a little indicator of the number of words that you're typing in the lower left-hand corner. But this can also be hidden. We're going to exit focus mode and talk about some of these panels and how you can configure them though. First, let's talk about view. View allows you to adjust widget positions. For example, if I wanted to hide the project summary because I found it was distracting, or if I felt like word usage wasn't useful, neither was tags, and I wanted the notepad on the other side, and if I wanted daily stats on the other side, I just move it around and I have it exactly the way that I want it. Under view, you can also change what's displayed here. If we view the project outline, this is showing you your full manuscript and any reference documentation. And if you click on a reference document, you can very quickly make changes to that document, back out, and continue to do work. If you click on one of these items, it's going to navigate to that particular chapter because it's part of your manuscript. Inside of the editor, you'll also find a large number of controls for your content itself. You can very easily apply a drop cap. You can also insert a LitRPG Stat Block, which will work on e-readers. We've tested it on Kindle and Apple Books, and it works because it's simple. Next, I want to talk about what you will see in your overall and today's widget. If you expand either one of these, you'll see a chart for the information for either today or overall. Because I haven't written in this project today, this chart is empty. I want to briefly give you a sense of what stretch goals look like. To do that, I'm going to compress my goal down to something very achievable, just for the sake of our discussion today. Actually, 50 is probably more my speed and more your time. All right, so I'm going to use voice dictation to make sure that this happens quickly. That's just so that I can generate enough words to get on the board without having to type them while you listen to the keyboard clack. In this particular case, I'm using WhisperFlow, which is actually a fantastic dictation tool, though it does have a cost. You can see that I'm getting those words in pretty quickly, and I've already reached a prompt to meet the 1x stretch goal, which is 75 words, and I'm at 110% of my own goal right now. Because I continue to do the dictation, though, we continue to see the stretch goals increase. And this will continue to push me on and on and on up until about 8x, where it kind of gives up. You can also see the closest competitor widget, where we're now 3 words ahead of Greg or Gage Nelson, who's in position 38. And now I've moved up to position 35, and we can see that Introdial is only 2 words ahead of me, and I'm passing people left and right, even though I'm not actually writing in my novel. I'm really kind of curious and wanting to continue to see how many people I can pass, but 100 words is probably a little far, so Renee is probably going to beat me today. But I'm happy with that 5x stretch goal that you can see in the top right corner. Next, I'm going to start a writing sprint. In this particular case, I'm just going to fight a monster solo. As soon as you hit the start button, the game begins. You can see a swing timer down below, and that means you're losing health. When you write words, the monster or the person will take damage themselves. In this case, I'm going to use dictation, that little sound you heard in the background, to get some words on the board to try and defeat him. You can see that he's taking damage, but so am I. Now I'm just going to try to finish him off with a few words, and we should be good to go. See that I've achieved victory, and I could repeat that sprint again right now if I wanted to. Sprints come in a variety of flavors, and this is just one. Many of our users love competing against their friends, where you can have large groups of people with either first to the finish line or just a timer to see how many words that you can generate. Now, a quick note on dictation and pasting content. I'm going to quickly just grab this section of content and paste. You'll notice that it says a paste was detected. We don't allow pasted content to contribute to a leaderboard. We do allow dictation. A few notes about the controls you have available on this page. One, you have version history, data recovery, the ability to copy HTML to a clipboard. For example, if you wanted to paste the HTML into Royal Road's source editor, this is a great way to very quickly get your chapter's HTML. Make sure that your stat block and other styling is carried over into their experience. You can also sync to Google Docs. This is a one-way sync and it is not automatic. So if you want to back up to Google Docs, this is the best way to do it. Finally, you can edit your settings. When you edit settings, you can change your document type. This, again, will impact automatic numbering. So if you do not want an item to be considered as part of the automatic numbering of chapters, make it front matter, back matter, or optional. Next, I want to highlight plot points. This is an easy way to keep track of small elements that you want to complete in your project, and I'll show you more with the mobile view later. But for example, let's say we have 3 objectives, and I'm just going to name them Objective 1, Objective 2, and Objective 3. These are simply a checklist that you can mark as completed or not, or drag them up and down if you feel something needs to be done in a different order. You also have a notepad, and in the notepad, you can expand this to be able to see it in a full side panel so that you have plenty of room to work. Now we're going to talk about the planning experience. Inside of the plan view, you can see a card for every one of your chapters. In this case, you can see that my prologue has plot points, and if I wanted to, I could show tags or hide tags. And let's say that I have a character named Tim. I can quickly select that. In this particular case, there are custom characters that will trigger a particular tag. So if I wanted to indicate this was a POV, now I've said Sarah is a POV character along with Tim, and they're going to be in Seattle in this particular chapter. And again, this will allow me to ask for feedback from beta readers at the end of the chapter because I'm using tags if I've chosen to use character and setting tags as part of that configuration under settings. Once again, you can drag and drop these plot points. Additionally, if you change your view to a horizontal list, you can drag one item across to a different chapter. So it's very easy for you to move things around. One of the AI features that we have that is fairly simplistic and no data is ever stored is to summarize a chapter. Personally, I use this when I've forgotten all the details of the chapter that I was working on, or let a project sit too long and I'm trying to remember what it was about. It doesn't do anything besides summarize. It won't help you or brainstorm with you. It will just do its best to tell you what it thinks inside of that chapter. Next, I want to talk about the manuscript panel. You can grab any of these items to drag and drop them to a new location in your manuscript. You can also right-click to set the status of a particular document, add a new document directly after the one you've clicked on, or add a new section. And that was a right-click action that brought up this menu. This is a brand new project. Nothing has been added to it, and we do provide some initial story structure templates that you could use if you would like to. In my case, I'm just going to use the Fichtean curve because it's simple, and you can see that I now have 3 items. This obviously isn't going to be your whole novel, but it gives you something to start with and be thinking about. Additionally, if you don't like some of these controls because they're not helpful, you can click these buttons at the top to hide them. Next, I want to talk about characters, settings, world building, and story structure. When you select characters, right-click and add a character and go into that character's information, you'll see that there is structured information that you can provide about this character. The intention is that if some individual would like to use AI in the future, they will be able to add their own API keys and leverage this structured information to get feedback and brainstorm. However, we have no current plans of releasing this publicly. We've done some internal testing, but it's not intended for public use. Next, you can see notes. Notes is just a free-form way of collecting information about a character, but you can quickly add some information that you think would be helpful. If I click these items, it's simply adding headings with a spot in the editor for you to provide additional content. Under world building, we have a world building document, a magic system, and an organization. Each one will have custom fields designed to help you make smart choices about the information you want to collect. This is also something that we're open to feedback on and happy to extend in the future. Under story structure, you can also add a story structure document and a theme if those are things that matter to you in your writing. This is the plan view of an active project that I'm working on. You can see that it can get a little bit messy. There's a lot going on, and there's more that I'm adding all the time to try and keep all of my ideas organized. And sometimes these are just things that I really want to be able to showcase in the story, and it may wind up in a different chapter altogether. But this is a great way for me to keep track of things. And if you want to clean it up, again, you have full control over what the editor displays. Finally, I wanted to briefly touch on the stats page that's part of the editor experience. This is just simply giving you a high-level overview of how you're performing from a statistical perspective. You can see your average, but also your total and which was your most productive day. You can also display this differently if you're interested in doing so. Again, this is just intended for you to be able to see all the metrics about this particular project. The last thing that I want to talk about is the Epub export. And I'm going to switch projects for this. When you visit Epub export settings, this is the same settings that show up in your project settings export section. It's just showing you a limited preview of what this will look like when you actually create the Epub file. In my case, I'm simply going to change the font, and then I'm going to export the Epub book. This happens almost instantly. And what we're going to look at now is the preview inside of Apple Books. And you'll notice that it's picked up the font for the headings. We have our table of contents. You can see that we have a drop cap and we have a prologue title. Now this one again was front matter, so it's not showing a number. However, if we go to chapter 1, you'll see that we are showing the number and the subtitle because I chose to use subtitles to describe my chapters. If I simply called it chapter 1, it would show 1 or chapter 1. Again, you can configure that in your options. But what you can see also is that this looks pretty dang good. Everything's indented. You have drop caps, you have beautiful titles, and you have configuration. And this took all of a couple of clicks to get it the way I wanted. And it also works in Kindle Previewer 3, which is the best-in-class way of understanding if your ebook looks good on Amazon. Now to talk a little bit about the leaderboard. The leaderboard is a way where you can see how you rank on a yearly, monthly, or daily basis. Before we wrap up, I just wanted to give you a little bit of information about other things that WritingHabit offers. And we have 3 key challenges that repeat throughout the year. Our novel writing challenge is simply a 50K word challenge in November and April. You can see when it's coming, but you can also see how everybody's doing on a given month. This is our streak challenge page. You can see how many days in a given month somebody has written so far, as well as their total words. In addition, you can see who has the largest cumulative streak overall across the entire app year over year. Our most recent challenge is bingo. There's individual challenges that you can complete, and when you complete a challenge, you get a bingo. During challenge months, you get raffle entries for prizes for completing bingos and blackouts. I want to briefly touch on some of the tools that we have available too. You can create groups, and those groups can have their own leaderboards within them and discussion forums and aggregated word counts, time, and number of days written from all members of that group. There's also features for teachers to be able to see assignments or give assignments to students and see how many words students are writing, as well as look into the projects for their students. If you're a teacher and interested, please reach out to us. Next, writing prompts. This is just a simple place where we provided prompts that you can select that cover a variety of genres, and you can see public projects from other people if you're interested in learning more or reading some of the content that other people are producing. WritingHabit also has a reading view. This is essentially public projects where people can review your work if you've decided to make it public and leave feedback at the end of each chapter. Additionally, one thing that I left out was the ability to publish chapters. Because this is my project, if I were to go to the very last chapter and choose publish or unpublish, this will make it either accessible or inaccessible to whoever I specified on the sharing page. It also will post an article to your public profile about the publication of that chapter, assuming that it's public, so that anyone who follows you on WritingHabit will receive a notification and can come read those new chapters. Before we wrap up, I wanted to briefly mention the editing markup guide. I believe that it makes it way easier to get good feedback if you give people the ability to give you that feedback very quickly in a structured way. So the editing markup guide contains a bunch of different types of editing marks that come with both an example and explanation. This allows people who are giving feedback to say something to you very quickly without having to spell it all out. You, as a person who's giving feedback, can also specify your favorites, and this will show up in the editor. Let me show you what I mean. Inside of Genesis, I can select some text, and you can see that there's these 3 items. Those are the editing marks that I chose. Additionally, if I selected this word and just wanted to say, hey, I love that, or down here, I want to say, you know what, you should cut that. You can do things very, very quickly to respond to people with editing marks. Additionally, if I were to say I want an entirely different editing mark, the whole list is here. So I could come in here, make that selection, and then when the user clicked on it, it's going to show that editing mark. And if they click on the editing mark, they're going to get the details of what it means. This is just a way to make it easy for other people to give you good feedback very quickly, assuming they look at the editing marks and know what they mean. That's Writing Habit. If there's something here that's missing that you wish was here that would help you in your writing journey, our goal is to be the end-to-end writing platform that makes your life a little bit easier and lets you focus on what you love most, writing a book. Have a great day.